My boss said I was too useless to join a crucial meeting, so I let him fail in front of my billionaire uncle. I've been working at my company for years, grinding away while my boss, Mark, treated me like I was invisible. No matter how hard I worked, he saw me as nothing more than a background character. But the real kicker? When the company landed a massive $10 million deal, and I found out the investor was my uncle, Mark still refused to let me in the meeting. His words, please, you just embarrass us. Stay in your lane." So I did exactly that. I stayed in my lane, and I let him walk straight into the most humiliating moment of his career. By the time the meeting was over, his face was pale, his career was in ruins, and I was sitting at the table where I always should have been. Here's how it all went down. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Working under Mark was like being stuck in an endless loop of doing everything and getting credit for nothing. I had been at the company for 5 years, busting my ass to help land clients, fix major issues, and keep the whole damn department running. But no matter what I did, Mark never saw me as anything more than a disposable employee. He was the kind of boss who loved power trips. The moment he walked into the office, you could feel the mood shift, tense, suffocating, like we were all waiting for him to pick his next victim. He had favorites and surprise. I wasn't one of them. It didn't matter that I had single-handedly saved multiple client accounts. It didn't matter that I worked late nights fixing his mistakes. The moment something went wrong, he'd throw me under the bus like I was dead weight. I should have quit a long time ago, but I loved my job. Not because of him, but because I genuinely enjoyed what I did. Plus, I was good at it. Damn good. But that didn't matter to Mark. So when we landed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a $10 million deal with a billionaire investor, I thought, finally, this is my chance to prove myself. Boy, was I wrong. When word got out that our company was being considered for a $10 million investment, the entire office was buzzing. This wasn't just another deal. This was the kind of opportunity that could put us on the map. And here's the kicker. I was the one who first flagged the opportunity. I had been tracking industry trends, keeping an eye on major investors, and even drafted an initial strategy on how we could pitch our company to them. I knew this deal inside and out. So, when I heard that the company was sending a select team to seal the deal in a high-stakes meeting, I figured I'd finally get my moment, wrong again. Mark gathered the team in the conference room to discuss who would be attending. When I heard my name wasn't even mentioned, I raised my hand. "Hey, I've been working on this project from the start. I think I could bring some value to the meeting." Mark barely glanced at me before smirking. "Yeah, no. We need people who can actually contribute." I blinked. "I literally built the research you're using for this pitch." He laughed. The whole room chuckled along with him, like I had just said something ridiculous. "You don't have the right presence for a meeting like this," Mark said. "We need real decision makers in the room, not just background people." Background people. I clenched my fists under the table. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I swallowed my pride. Fine. If that's how he saw me, I wasn't going to argue. Because what Mark didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the billionaire investor they were about to meet, he was my uncle. As I sat there, listening to Mark brush me off like I was nothing, I had to fight the urge to laugh. He had no idea who he was about to meet. My uncle, Richard Carter, wasn't just a billionaire, he was a self-made billionaire. The kind of guy who could smell arrogance from a mile away and had zero tolerance for incompetence. Growing up, Uncle Richard had been my biggest inspiration. He built his empire from the ground up, and he always taught me the value of hard work, intelligence, and loyalty. He wasn't the type to flaunt his wealth, but when he made moves, the entire industry paid attention. Here's the thing, I never talked about my connection to him. Not because I was ashamed, far from it, but because I never wanted special treatment. I wanted to earn my place in the business world on my own merit, but now I had a front row seat to Mark's downfall. I kept my mouth shut as he and his hand-picked team finalized their presentation. They were clueless about what my uncle actually valued. They were focusing on profit margins, market dominance, and aggressive expansion. the same empty promises he'd heard 100 times before. But I knew Uncle Richard, and I knew that what he cared about was people, ethics, innovation. He wasn't going to invest in numbers. He was going to invest in the right team. And Mark was about to fail spectacularly. So instead of fighting for a spot at that meeting, I sat back, smiled, and let them walk straight into disaster. The day of the big meeting arrived, and the entire office was on edge. Mark and his chosen team were dressed to impress, carrying their over-rehearsed presentations, convinced they were about to lock down a $10 million deal. I watched from my desk as they strutted out, completely unaware that they were heading into a room where they didn't stand a chance. Now, I could have given them a warning. I could have told them, hey, maybe rethink your strategy because the guy you're about to pitch to doesn't care about your corporate nonsense. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, pulled up the company email, and waited. See, Uncle Richard and I hadn't talked in a while, but we always stayed in touch. The moment he saw my company's name on the meeting invite, I knew he'd put two and two together. And sure enough, less than an hour after the meeting started, I got an email from him. Subject, your boss is an idiot. I chuckled and clicked it open. Hey kid, just left the meeting. Your boss, completely clueless. Spent the whole time talking about how innovative they are, but couldn't answer a single real question. It was painful. Call me when you're free. I grinned. Mark had no idea that while he was desperately trying to impress a billionaire, that same billionaire was emailing one of his useless background employees. And it was about to get even better. I stepped outside to call Uncle Richard, already knowing how this conversation was going to go. The second he picked up, I could hear the amusement in his voice. That was painful to sit through, he said. Does your boss always talk that much without actually saying anything? I laughed. Oh, that was him on his best behavior. So, how bad was it? Worse than you think, Uncle Richard sighed. They came in acting like I was already sold on the deal, throwing around corporate buzzwords like it was supposed to impress me. Not a single one of them actually listened to what I wanted. When I asked about their long-term vision, they froze. And when I brought up their company culture, he chuckled. Your boss panicked and started talking about productivity metrics. I face-palmed. Of course, Mark had gone straight to the numbers. Uncle Richard didn't care about empty figures. He cared about leadership, ethics, and whether a company had the potential to be something great. Mark had completely blown it. So, I'm guessing that's a no on the deal? I asked. Uncle Richard hummed thoughtfully. Not necessarily, I frowned. Wait, what? I like the company. There's potential, but only with the right leadership. His voice turned serious. And that sure as hell isn't Mark. That's when it hit me. Uncle Richard wasn't just rejecting the deal, he was making a move. And suddenly, I realized Mark's downfall was only just beginning. Uncle Richard's words lingered in my mind. There's potential, but only with the right leadership. It didn't take a genius to figure out what he was hinting at. He wasn't walking away from the deal. He was planning something bigger. I took a deep breath. What are you thinking? Simple, he said. Your company is a mess because of people like Mark. But if the right person were in charge, it could actually thrive. So instead of investing in them, I'm going to buy them out. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? You're going to take over the company? Not directly, Uncle Richard clarified. I've got partners who'd be more than happy to make the offer. If the board has even a shred of intelligence, they'll push for it. And once the dust settles, guess who I want on the new leadership team? My stomach flipped. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious, he said. You've been carrying this company behind the scenes for years. I've been watching you even if you didn't know it. You've got the brains, the work ethic, and unlike Mark, you actually understand business. I was speechless. Uncle Richard had just flipped everything on its head. Mark had spent years treating me like I was worthless. And now, I was about to be part of the team that would replace him. The best part? He still had no idea. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. Uncle Richard wasn't just rejecting Mark's offer, he was about to replace him entirely. But I wasn't about to sit around and wait for the news to reach Mark. No, I wanted to be front and center when he realized his career was crumbling. The very next morning, the whispers started. An emergency board meeting had been scheduled, something that never happened unless something big was going down. Mark walked into the office looking extra smug, probably assuming the board wanted to congratulate him on landing the deal. Oh, how wrong he was. About an hour later, I got a message from an executive assistant I was friendly with. EA, you're gonna want to be in the office for this one. Me, what's happening? EA, Mark's about to have the worst day of his life. I grinned. I could already see it coming. Turns out, Uncle Richard's people had moved fast. By the time Mark was sitting down in that boardroom, an official buyout offer had already been sent to the board, and from what I heard, the board members were ecstatic. New leadership, a fresh start, an investor who actually knew what they were doing. Mark, on the other hand, he was losing it. "This is ridiculous! I had everything under control," he had apparently yelled. "You can't just—" Actually, one of the senior board members had cut him off. "We can." It was over, and I was about to make sure he knew it. The moment the board meeting ended, the entire office felt different. People were whispering, heads were turning, and a strange electric tension filled the air. Everyone knew something big had just happened. Then Mark stormed out of the boardroom. His face was bright red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. He didn't look at anyone. He just power-walked straight to his office, slamming the door behind him. I waited. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, I got the email I'd been expecting. Subject: urgent, all hands, meeting at 3 p.m. I chuckled. Mark was about to do what he always did, pretend he still had control. By 3 p.m., the whole office gathered in the conference room. Mark stood at the front, shoulders tense, gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I know there are a lot of rumors flying around," he began, forcing a tight smile. "But let me make one thing clear. This company is still under my leadership, and nothing is changing." I nearly burst out laughing. Everyone in the room knew he was lying. He was scrambling, desperate to hold on to power. But the whispers around me told me that no one was buying it. Then, just as he was finishing his pathetic speech, an assistant rushed in, looking pale as a ghost. She whispered something in Mark's ear. His face went completely white. "That's impossible," he muttered. "There's no way—" She whispered again. And then, right in front of the entire office, Mark stumbled back, looking like he was about to pass out. Because the assistant had just confirmed what we already knew. The buyout had been finalized. The board had officially accepted Uncle Richard's offer. Mark was finished. For a long moment, Mark just stood there, frozen. The entire office was silent, watching him like a ticking time bomb about to explode. Then, without another word, he stormed out. I followed, keeping a safe distance as he marched down the hall, past his office, straight toward the executive suites. I already knew where he was going, the boardroom. By the time I got there, the doors were already open. The senior executives and board members sat calmly, while Mark stood in front of them, completely unraveling. "You can't just push me out," he shouted. "I built this company. I've been running things for years." "And that," one of the board members cut him off, "is exactly the problem." Mark's face turned a shade of red I didn't even know was possible. "You're making a mistake. You're letting some outsider come in and—" "Richard Carter isn't an outsider." The voice was calm, steady. Uncle Richard. I turned to see him standing at the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching Mark like he was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "He's been here longer than you think," Uncle Richard continued. "You just never noticed." Mark whipped around, his confusion slowly morphing into horrified realization. His eyes landed on me. For the first time, I saw the exact moment he put it all together. The meetings, the buyout, the fact that Richard Carter, the man who now owned the company, was my uncle. His voice cracked. You knew about this?" I finally stepped forward, meeting his panicked gaze head on. "Of course I knew," I said. "I just didn't think you were worth warning." Mark staggered back. His face was a mixture of rage, disbelief, and pure humiliation. Uncle Richard sighed. "You can leave now, Mark. Your office is being cleared as we speak." And just like that, it was over. Mark had spent years treating me like I was worthless. Now, he was the one being escorted out. Mark stood there, completely defeated, his hands clenched into fists, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for a way to fight back. But there was nothing left to say. The security team stepped in, and just like that, he was escorted out of the building. No farewell speech, no dramatic exit, just a pathetic, quiet walk of shame. The office erupted the moment he was gone. People whispered, some stared at me with shock, and a few even smiled. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because now, I had work to do. I turned back to Uncle Richard. So, what now? He grinned. Now we rebuild, and I want you at the table. My heart pounded. This was it. I had spent years being ignored, underestimated, and dismissed. But now, I was in the room where the real decisions were made. I was given a high-level leadership role in the new company structure. Not because of favoritism, but because Uncle Richard knew I had the brains and work ethic to actually make a difference. Within months, the company flourished under new leadership. Toxicity, gone. Productivity, through the roof. And Mark, well, I heard he tried to get another executive job, but his reputation was ruined. No one wanted to hire a guy who had fumbled a $10 million deal and been kicked out of his own company. Karma did the rest. This experience taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Never underestimate the background people. We're often the ones holding everything together. Toxic bosses always expose themselves. Just give them time. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success. So, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or treated like you're not enough, just remember, your time is coming. Have you ever had a terrible boss? How did you deal with it? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more wild workplace stories. Thanks for watching.